Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Career Talks podcast. This is episode 33, so we are progressing and moving forward. As always, I'm your host, Orlando Haynes. And again, super excited about the amazing talent that I get to speak with on this platform. And they can share their advice to my audience, not only mine, but your audience and our connections to really help them propel in their career. So the whole goal of this career podcast is to provide actionable advice. That's the purpose, right? To provide job seekers with actionable advice to help them in their career. So before we get started, definitely want to thank tonight's sponsor. As always, a big super supporter, Ms. Deborah Russell, who is the founder and president of Agape Career Counseling Group, where they focus on helping you discover your career that you love, located here in the state of Florida, here in Tampa, Florida. So you can always go to agape.com. Well, let me give you the correct website. It's Agape, so AGAPECCG.com. I'll put the link in the notes after the show. And she also definitely check her out. She has recently launched a perfume. So you might be thinking, what does one have to do with the other? I think it's just we're just expanding our entrepreneurial skills and talents. And so she's launched a lady perfume, obviously, called Benny Bee. So you'll see a link for that as well. But as always, Deborah, thank you for the continued support in Agape Career Counseling Group. They do HR and small business consulting, so definitely check them out. So tonight's guest, young lady I've been connected to for quite a bit of time. Glad we connected and reached out to share some of her expertise here. Willena Long, she's a certified career coach, public speaker, and the founder of Interview University, but we'll talk about that. It's not all she does. She doesn't just do interview, coaching. She does full circle career coaching. So we'll want to make sure we're diving in. But tonight, the topic is developing that interview skill set, or should I say mindset, when you're interviewing, which is crucial. Sometimes we get stuck. But we're going to break that stigma and that mindset tonight with this amazing young lady. So without further ado, let me bring on Miss Willena Long. How are you?
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm great. How are you?
Good. So before we get started, a lot, because I see your posts, you're super active on LinkedIn, sharing amazing advice. But before we dive into that, just share with folks more about Coach Willena and who you are.
Yes. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I listen to your show Tuesday nights, and it is filled with amazing content. So I'm excited to be a part of the journey as well. I am Coach Willena. I am a career coach. First, I help ordinary people have extraordinary careers. I am also a technical recruiter. I have been in the recruiting space for over a decade now. I work for some of the most well-known brands, such as Pods. I got my start there, as well as Facebook, Amazon, and I am currently a technical recruiter at Roblox.
Cool. So we have a shared background. You just stated you formerly work at Pods. I currently work at Pods. We both worked at Amazon, so we have a similar track record and upbringing in the space. So that's pretty cool. Like that a lot. So we connected. We talked via LinkedIn a little bit, and this topic came about because I was, again, watching your content, and I kind of took from the interview. I was under the same assumption, but I knew you were a certified career coach. But I said, okay, so the reason why you might have branded, interview coach, interview university, is because you may have seen a gap in there. So let me first ask you that as well. Why did you initially brand your company Interview University?
Yes, that is exactly right, Orlando. I was being in this space for so long. I literally see everyone go through interviews, either whether it be with me or the hiring managers. And a lot of people were making the same mistake in the process. That was kind of one part of the bottleneck between interest to offer. And so I started creating interview training as it pertained to individuals looking to get into certain tech companies. So I would provide a deep dive analysis onto the company and provide that one-on-one training to help people land the jobs that they are looking for and not make the same mistakes others were making. As I continued to grow down that path, I realized it wasn't just the interview It was also how people presented themselves on their profiles,
Mm.
their resumes, their LinkedIn profiles, really all encompassing. And so that's where I started to expand into a whole nother realm and becoming more focused as a career coach, not just an interview trainer.
Love it, love it. So, with tonight's topic being developing your interview mindset, talk to us. Are you seeing just those mistakes, like you said? Is there one consistency as you work with clients and things of the like? What's the mindset that you're hearing out there in the market, even as a recruiter, as you're talking to candidates, but both in the business? What are you seeing there that can be corrected out there?
From a mindset perspective, I would say it's important to first believe that you belong in that particular
Mm,
position. That goes a long way, especially when you're new to big brands. A lot of people are intimidated by the big box companies, such as the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Robloxes of the world, and this is their first shot at big tech. And so they almost are too, they're really nervous. And some of it's natural, right? I was nervous. Anybody would be
yeah.
who had that opportunity. But sometimes it hinders your ability to show your best self because you're coming in so nervous, you forget the answer or you forget how to communicate effectively. And that begins to show that either you're not qualified for the position or you're kind of pushing yourself out. And I think if you were to believe that you belonged, regardless of how big the brand is, you bring something unique to the table, which is yourself. So if you could bring that to every interview, you'll be light years ahead of a lot of people who really freeze up when it comes time to perform.
So I'm sure we have some personal stories we can share, and I'll call out Amazon again, right? Uh, are you? Do you think people are overthinking it, right? When they get this opportunity to land, with the Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 100 companies, they're like, "Wow, the expectations must be this." Um, when I go into this initial interview, and then they just freeze up, brain freeze. Like you can share a personal story or just any ones that you've talked to. What do you think on in terms of them overthinking the process because of the organization, like you mentioned earlier?
I think it doesn't necessarily, I think I'll take it back to my humble beginnings.
Mm,
So, when I first started in recruiting at Pods, I was hiring for customer service representatives. And you would think the higher you get into a position, the more confident you are. But the customer service agents that I was hiring for in the beginning of my career were so nervous. Oh my gosh, this is like such a great opportunity. And this is going to affect my whole family. And I'm really excited. And, of course, at that time, I'm giving, okay, this is great. Yes, you got this. Let's be confident, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same thing at a high level. It may not be as specific of, oh my God, they're saying it, but they're showing it. I think it's just, again, it's still the confidence piece. At any level, I think there's still people out there, even if they are at director level positions. I hire TPMs, M6 level positions of people who are VPs, and some of them still have that imposter syndrome or fear of belonging because I've not been at in this situation, such a big company before. Do I belong?
yeah, and that's a really good point because I wondered too. I might be saying the same thing twice, just in different ways. That we psych ourselves out based on the brand or what the perception of landing this organization, again, $1 billion brand, um, and assuming that, okay, I've reached the pinnacle. I got to perform 10x above my peers, and the expectation of me being whatever role you play, HR, recruiting, operations, finance, I need to be that much better. And just the thought process, not even getting the job yet, but just the thought process of going into the interview, and you just get stuck. You get a brain freeze, and you're like, oh my god, I can't mess this up. This is life changing to have Facebook, Amazon, Pods, whatever, on my resume. So that's interesting. That's interesting. What are some of the pitfalls, as you start to break that down, that you see professionals making in the interview process?
Surprisingly enough, a lot of people end up talking themselves out of the position.
Mm,
A lot of people are afraid of dead air. So when they're interviewing for a position, they hardly take a breath. They're just rambling on and on and on and on and on, and to the point where literally they're gasping for air during an interview. And sometimes when they begin, because they're nervous, they ramble to the point where they begin to overshare, and that's where you mess up. The second you start oversharing, the hiring manager is just sitting there watching you, you know, flail at this point. Uh, but I've had several occasions where a hiring manager during our debrief session, where we're talking about the candidate after the call, and they're like, "Well, it started off really good. They had a lot of good information. You know, I think they might be a fit for the role, but then they said this and a couple of things that were super red flags, and I just don't think they're ready for the position." Had they not said those things, had they just let it be silent, let it absorb in the room what you just said, they talk themselves right out of the position.
Wow. Yep. I think that's. Well, let me ask you this: have you seen that heighten because of this market? You know, the great reshuffle, the great resignation, the disparity between jobs and availability of candidates. Are you seeing that much of a shift where folks are, one, overthinking it, and then two, not putting enough thought into it?
I think it's on both sides of the spectrum, right? Because I feel like you have the people that are still in that same boat, but then you have the people who now feel hot, like hot shots, right? Because now it's such a competitive market. They have so many competing offers, and they have a chip on their shoulders, and then they're like, "Oh, I don't, I can be anywhere. I'm it," and then they end up seeming a little too arrogant. And who wants an arrogant person on their team? Right?
Correct.
And they may have overshot themselves, like, they may have been bluffing on certain things, but the hiring manager, depending on the individual, may not have liked that type of demeanor. And so those are the things I still see. I still see it at the same level, but now you've added a few different people and personalities in the mix because now it's such a competitive market.
Got it. Yep, I see that all the time. I can tell you a story. I'll tell you offline.
Okay.
A story that happened based on that right there. But when it comes to the mindset, right? Let's drill down and kind of unpack a little bit more. Um, what's the prep work that you suggest or that you coach people and professionals on to be prepared, to be better prepared for their interview, regardless of role?
Well, it starts with like it's a brand.
Hmm.
Consider myself a brand. Orlando, I'm sure you consider yourself a brand. I have considered myself a brand since the beginning of my career. I considered myself, these people see me in a certain light, and that is a professional Black woman who gets stuff done, who does great work, who is great at their job. You are your own personal brand. Once you also start to realize that you're not just a worker, you're not just a number, you're a person who brings value, your mindset will start to shift. If with that, take actionable steps to get prepared. Do your research on the company. What do other people say about the company as it pertains to the role you're looking at? Start to look at who are the people doing the same job in the company that you want. How did they get there? What are people saying on Glassdoor about this particular company? You want to make sure it's a good fit for you. Ultimately, from a preparation perspective, there's a lot you can do to prepare for the position, which in turn will make you more confident. So for example, with my clients, as I'm coaching them, I tell them from a recruiter perspective, I'm giving you the answers to the test. I know what they're going to likely ask you. We all ask about the same questions,
Correct.
right? And if you knew, let's go back to high school, right? We took the SATs. Had someone given you the cheat sheet to the SATs with all the answers on it, wouldn't you have been more confident going into that? Wouldn't you have been like, oh, I got this?
Yep.
Again, back to the chip on your shoulders. That's the connection of preparation. You know what to expect, so you don't have to adapt. Even if it's not exactly the question, you've prepared in such a way by, even if you don't have a coach, for example, let's say you have some friends, some colleagues that can help go through some interview questions with you, just so you can start preparing. How do I answer this question? How did it sound? How can I improve? What story am I telling? Is the story the story you should be telling in an interview is why you should invest in me as an employee. why you need me on your team and why I'm the perfect investment. And once you start to realize that, it also empowers you. Know that the employer invited you for an interview because they thought you were a fit. So that should be one barrier broken back down for you, in the mindset of I belong here. Ultimately, it's all about you belong, you belong, you belong. And once you get, now that you're in the, you got your foot, your pinky toe in the door, you belong here, right? So what are you going to do with it? So those are some of the things, actionable steps that you can take to really prepare for an interview.
I like that because, and something you said earlier, it's the brand piece too. Like I'm working on something behind the scenes that I call it "Bring Your Brand to Work." So, but the fact that you're talking about the brand piece, and a lot of folks don't realize that and wonder. Not to go off topic just a little bit, but the importance of it is key because, like you said, you build more confidence when you know what you're bringing to the table, right? Versus you're just scrambling and hoping that you don't go too far in the interview. Your nerves are kicking in, and then you're throwing up all over the interviewer, right? You're just sharing all this. You're afraid of the awkward pause. You're not willing to think through the process.
And to add to that, Orlando, your brand follows you.
Hmm.
So had we, I mean, what's the likeliness that someone I would meet worked at a company I worked for 10 years ago? You know what I mean? There are people that are probably still there that remember me because I make memorable experiences, but people will remember me, but they will never say that that person didn't work hard. At your next company, you never know who was where you used to be and who will or won't vouch for you. So that's why it's also really important to make good impressions, don't burn bridges, make proper connections with people. Don't just be a fly on the wall, even if it's just a customer service position, for example. I started on the phones as a customer service agent and figured out a way to now pivot myself into fantastic opportunities working for some of the biggest companies in the world.
Love it, love it. Now, when it comes to being in the actual interview itself,
Mhm.
share some tips that can bring us a sense of peace because like you said we can be super nervous, overthink, miss the question, answer it incorrectly. How are you coaching some of your clients to be like, hey, here's some quick tips for you to be more effective and consistent and concise in your interview?
Because I typically know some of the questions they may ask, like, what's your biggest strength or your weakness? Or tell me
Mhm.
about a time you had to overcome an objection, or tell me about a time that, a product launch deadline was missed because of something you did, or whatever. You know, start to think about those particular questions and already start thinking of stories. Somebody gave me some advice that turned out to be really good. Get a journal, a career journal, and start jotting down memorable experiences so that when you start going through interviews, even if it's now, later, whatever, you can reflect back. Because the problem a lot of people have is they don't remember the stories. So when the biggest fail that you have is not answering the question, a lot of people will go into an interview, a hiring manager will say, tell me about a time you failed at a project. And then their response is, well, I would such and such and such. That's
Hmm.
not the question. The question was, tell me about a time, which means give me an example of a story. Tell me a story where that happened to you. If you can't tell me a story, I am either going to think you're not listening or you've never experienced that, which also means you're not qualified for the position because you should be able to answer that if you're at a certain level, right? So the biggest advice I can provide without going into taking up all your time is going to be listening to what the interviewer is asking and answering that question only. Don't go beyond, don't go too far. Let them ask the next question. Give them time to absorb it, as I said earlier, and ask follow-up questions if they need to. But give them the story that they're asking for. Don't just give them a high-level overview. The more technical you get in a position, they need to know how technical are you. And again, I'm not sure exactly your audience, but the more technical you are, the more in depth we as recruiters and as well, Orlando, based on the positions that your company hires for, is that we want to know what's your tech depth.
Mm.
What's the depth you are in any particular role? It doesn't even have to be just tech. What is your problem solving and solution ability? So how you answer that will tell me exactly what level you are. If you're too high level, the hiring manager is going to either think, again, maybe you're not qualified for this position, or maybe you're not listening, but nonetheless, you're not a fit. So give the answers as asked.
Let me ask you this: when it comes to get your opinion on this, when it comes to answering a question in terms of length, I used to coach people to say at least a 1.5 minute response, but that it's clear and concise enough that the hiring manager, he or she, necessarily doesn't follow, ask you a follow up question unless it's more like, "Oh, tell me more," versus a follow up question that's like, "No, I'm sorry, I didn't understand."
Right.
So, in terms of just timeline, what do you go that deep into it? Just say, "Hey, keep it brief in terms of a minute, minute and a half, 2 minute response."
Right. I keep in mind to focus on also the time without staring
Hmm.
at the clock. You only have 30 minutes minimum, 45 minutes medium, 1 hour maximum, right? Depending on the interview. So
Correct.
you want to make sure, know that they're probably going to ask you about 5 or so questions, 5 to 7 questions. And you need to also ask at least 3 questions at the end. So you need to be brief, but get to the point. There should be a beginning, middle, of an end to your story. What was the problem? How did you come to the conclusion of the solution? And then what were the tools and things you did to get there? Beginning, middle, and end of your story, but get to the point, right? Because as you ramble, your recruiter or your hiring manager, you're going to start noticing their eyes start to glaze over, they start daydreaming if you get too
Correct.
long-winded. And that's me. So get to the point for sure.
So it sounds like you described a little bit of the STAR method.
Yep.
So is that still relevant? Do managers still kind of look for that? I know Amazon's big on the STAR method.
Yes.
That's typically their whole model, unless they've changed it, but that's typically their whole model now.
Mhm.
I always coach folks or say, you actually say the words of for folks that don't know what STAR is: situation, task, action, result. It's I say the word in your response. So if the situation was X, the task I had to do was this, the action I took was that, the result that yielded from what I did was again Y. Um, is that relevant in the tech space as much? Talk to
Yes.
us about that.
Yeah, 100%. Because again, you're telling a story, and the story you're telling me is telling me whether or not you've actually done something or not. If I'm asking you, tell me about a time, or tell me what you would do if you're building a messenger platform on like Facebook Messenger, what would you do to build that platform?
Mm,
You know, in that particular situation, I'm asking for more detailed response, like latency and what's a load balance, and what is the how many people can do it, and et cetera. What device are they using it on? Those are particular responses that are task and skill oriented, versus if it's behavioral based questions where again they're asking you to tell me about a time you experienced something. They definitely are looking for that behavioral based response, which goes back to the STAR method.
did you ever find yourself where you're more in a conversation type interview and you're not asking as many questions because you're just, you kind of you the camaraderie is there with that person. And this is more from a recruiter question. See if this ever happened to you, to where you're like, you know what, they're great. You love their personality, but you're like, man, I did. You moved them on, and now you're like, did I ask enough technical questions or enough in depth questions skill wise? Because personality was great. The stories they told were great. Have that ever happened to you because they drew you into more of a conversational style interview?
No, because I stick to my way of questioning things, and
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
always the same so that I don't miss anything. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to go to that situation where the hiring manager says, "Why did you bring this person forward?" And you can't be like, "Well, I mean, I really like them. They were cool. They gave me good vibes." I have to have concrete responses. So I make, although it is the feedback that I always get from my candidates is that you made me feel better,
Hmm.
feel inviting, and it didn't feel like an interview. So there's still a way to ask my questions and not make it seem so tell me about a time, robotic, all of that,
Correct.
but still conversational. Well, let's move into this part. So tell me what, et cetera, blah 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 blah. So it still feels welcoming and inviting and not so stuffy.
Now, what are some of the don'ts, right? We that you're seeing that we shouldn't do? Because again, you got some folks that are transitioning careers who haven't interviewed in 5 years, 10 years, right, 15 years, and they find themselves either with an opportunity because of the market and increase of income, or just because of what the market holds, and it's a decrease in the company's headcount. So, what are some major don'ts that you're still seeing that are kind of prevalent out there?
Don't badmouth your previous employer. Never. Even if they were the worst company and everybody else knows it. Still don't go into a conversation with negative energy. That can change the entire, because no one wants a complainer on the team either, right? And if you start the conversation complaining, I don't want to work with
Mhm.
that person. They're going to be a Debbie Downer. So, number one is, even if things didn't work out in a company, don't badmouth them. Take it as an opportunity to say, there were other opportunities that were a fit, or growth opportunities, or if you were laid off, right now, that is happening more than ever, right? Over
Correct.
through the pandemic. So that's not going to be like alarming to a recruiter. So don't be afraid to share it and leave it there. Just drop it off and walk away. Don't overshare. As I said, oversharing is what gets you in trouble.
So you had a background of not just tech, but obviously customer service and different areas. What are some of the strongest interview tips that you've seen, or just maybe recognized or remembered from a candidate? You like, wow, that I've noticed either in a response or the way they processed a question. What are some great tips in that way, if that makes sense?
Can you reframe the question? So you're
Hmm.
saying, what have I noticed that people are doing well? Is that what you mean?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Telling the story. So I'm not a super technical person. I'm not an engineer, but engineers are going to have to work with non-tech people. They should
Hmm.
be able to make it make sense in layman's terms, because they're working with cross-functional teams. So I admire the high-tech people who are able to tell a story that even makes sense to me, the non-technical person. So being able to control the story is always impressive to me.
And in terms of closing out an interview, right? How are you coaching folks to close that out on a more positive tip?
I always, always, always tell every single person I work with, at the very last question, other than what are the next steps,
Hmm.
should always be, is there anything on my profile, my LinkedIn, or the conversation we had today that makes you feel like I'm not a fit for your team, that you don't want me on this team? It gets you in front of the interviewer face to face and say, hey, this is your last chance to sell yourself. And a lot of, surprisingly, every time I sometimes give that, even if I'm interviewing, you're like, no one's ever asked. That's one way to sell it. Is there anything that you want to tell me? And a lot of people will be honest and tell you, well, I'm concerned about this. And can you tell me? And then that gives you an opportunity to overcome that objection. It gives you that opportunity to, one last ditch effort to save yourself in this interview, to say, oh, okay, well, at first I didn't think this person was a fit, but they answered those particular questions, and now I get it. I think they're a fit. There's been a lot of times my clients have told me that made the difference. It's made a difference for me as well in my interviewing. So that would be the big thing that is really important at the very end of the interview. Always save time for that.
Got it. So let's flip it. So still on the mindset, developing the mindset of the interview, your interview mindset rather. It goes both ways, right? You have the person interviewing for the job and the person interviewing the candidate. Um, are you in a position now, or have been, where you're coaching management on having a more effective interview so they can get as much as they can from that candidate? And if so, um, what are you educating those managers to say? Or
I think, what was that?
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think for me, the first step was opening up the mindset that not everybody is going to come from the same walks of life and same backgrounds. Because there was a period of time, Orlando, and I'm sure you can relate to this as well or recall, where hiring managers were very stern on they must have this degree, they must have this experience, they must have worked with these companies, or no, thank you. But now, as time progresses, more people become self taught, but also it's become such a competitive market. People are starting to have to say, well, maybe we should open our minds to other people because the market is so crazy. And if you want your position to be filled, you really need to think outside of the box and be willing to hear from other people. So, having those tough conversations to ensure that all voices are heard is the reason I continue to do what I do in recruiting, because somebody's got to advocate for the underdog, if you will, that isn't from Harvard, that isn't from Yale, that doesn't come from a MIT background and all of that kind of stuff, and then making sure from a diversity perspective that we're not having any unconscious bias. So I hold the mirror to my hiring manager and say, well, why did you really not like this candidate? Can you give me specifics? If you can't give me specifics, we should get a second opinion, right? Because sometimes hiring managers will, it'll be a vibe. A vibe? That is not a thing when it comes to hiring. I need tangible data.
Exactly.
Okay. What is it that you give me specifics as to why you did or didn't like this person? So either we can change it or replicate it. So I think the behind the scenes conversations are more so about proper training, because some
Mhm.
hiring managers have been hiring managers forever. And then or even if they weren't, who they were taught them the same bad techniques, right? So educating them on how you should be thinking outside of the box, how you should really be thinking from a human side of things, and making sure that everyone is getting a fair shake if they've gotten to this part of the interview, not just dismissing them because they don't look like everybody else on the team.
That's a really good point because you'll have people leaders, right, that by default become hiring managers because they inherit a team or need to build a
Mhm.
team, but yet haven't developed the skills to interview effectively and make it a more of a conversation versus an interrogation style
Right.
interview. And again, I think it's crucial that if given, I'm not sure if you know who Madeline Mann is. I had her on. We were talking about interviewing as well some months ago, but it's about making sure that one of the ways that some folks do. I don't know if many organizations even do it this way anymore, where they'll just say, "Hey, if it's going to be 3 steps, 4 steps, each manager you're focusing on culture fit." You're focusing on technical aptitude. You're focusing on leadership, so they don't cross over or have the same generic interview across the board, and you're
Mhm.
not getting any real key elements from that candidate. They say, well, based on criteria, my focus was this, and again, back to Amazon, that's how they did it.
Yeah.
Um, so they can pull each component out of that person and say, "Yep, collectively we thought this was a great fit," or "No, let's look at some more candidates and progress down the line." But so that's good. That's good.
Mhm.
Um, talk about. I noticed on your website that you have a program that you're launching or coming out soon, right? A masterclass.
Yes, I have a masterclass coming up where I am in 90 minutes. We will be transforming your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and giving you some high level tips on what to say or do in the interview process from the perspective of a recruiter.
Now, is that going to be a group masterclass, individual? I think
Group.
okay, okay. Share with us. I know we're talking about interview mindset, but again, I think all of this correlates together,
Mhm.
right? As you're talking about it, because as recruiters and folks should know this by now, we do all the research behind the scenes to figure out what or you are on paper, or you are in LinkedIn. Is there any disparities between your brand, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, what are some tips in each area? The resume, the LinkedIn profile. You don't have to share all the sauce, but and
Mhm.
also the interview piece that you're looking to share, just to entice some folks to get in that program.
Absolutely. So it is called the Career Accelerator Masterclass. What we're going to be talking about live is the resume. In the resume, I am teaching you how to tell a story. Your resume should really be 1 to 2 pages, depending on the level of experience you have. It's just almost to whet the palate of the recruiter, enough for them to say, yes, I want to interview. This person is worth a conversation. And there is
Okay.
a master way to do that. The LinkedIn profile is to really, it's your commercial, it's your Super Bowl ad space,
Love that.
right? So I'm teaching you in this 90-minute masterclass how to create your Super Bowl ad. Last Super Bowl, they paid what, like millions of dollars per ad. And you know what you were doing? Glued to the television, looking at it, trying to see what is this QR code for, you know? So that's how you have to look at it from the recruiter perspective. A recruiter is only really looking at your profile for about 30 seconds, just like the ad is 30 seconds,
Hmm.
right? So you have to tell the right story, catch their attention, and get them to say, yes, this person is worth a conversation, really in 30 seconds to a minute. That will make me want to go to your website, like on a Super Bowl ad. Oh, let me go check out what this is. Versus,
Hmm.
okay, let me go ahead and schedule a call with this person. Let me send them a message. So I'm teaching you how to create your own Super Bowl ad. And then in terms of the interview, I'm talking about the tangible things that you should really be focused on to. So as a recruiter, I was taught early on the importance of controlling the call, right?
Correct.
The importance of not letting that person ramble on so long that you never even got to really answering your questions. So I'm teaching you that same method in reverse. I'm teaching you how to control your brand, how to make sure in every single question you are the hero, right? We all want to watch the movie where the underdog turns out to be the hero and saves the world from the bad guy, right?
Right.
They've made the same Spider-Man movie a million times, and it keeps all being top dollar, right? Even though you know what's going to happen, you still go just in case the storyline has changed. Good and well, it ain't. Okay. So
Exactly.
you can be the hero of every interview where you are constantly the top dog and the hero at the end of every conversation.
I love that analogy of your LinkedIn profile is your Super Bowl commercial. That is huge. I love that a lot. Um, I wanted to unpack a piece, but we have a question here from Mark Nelson. He is asking, you might have answered this, but definitely address it again if you can. How do you explain the hiring managers having a set mind about a candidate?
Let's see. How do you explain hiring managers having a set mind about the candidate? I wouldn't say they have a set mind about the candidate, but they may think that success only looks a certain way. So, for
Mm.
example, they may say the profile needs to be an MIT grad, 10 years of experience doing this particular thing. They must have managed a team of 10. They must have done this and must have done that. And it may be a junior engineer position, right? Is that really relevant? So we're having more so eye-opening conversations. That's what is this degree make, if the person has relevant experience similar, because it's a big known, maybe a secret, but if you've not been in college for over 10 years, technology has changed. It's really not even relevant anymore. You know what I mean? Your IT degree, your computer science degree has now become obsolete because everything has changed since you went to school. So to have that, is that really relevant? I used to hire for security positions at Facebook, and they were seeking people who had worked in a space that had never been created before.
Mm.
So when you think about security, 10 years ago, Facebook wasn't really a thing, right? So there was no one could have had that experience because no one else was doing that same thing. So having that same conversation, like, what do you mean you need 10 years of experience? This just happened 5 years ago. We need to talk about where else could they have gotten this experience that works for you. Those are the conversations I'm having with hiring managers. Like, because people are human, right? And in most cases, you assume people know what you're talking about. You never want to assume negative intent, right? You just assume people know what you're talking about, but that's rarely the case. So having the conversations that we are having with hiring managers is, what is it that you mean? What does that look like? Who is the ideal candidate look like in this position, for example? What are some of the things that they've accomplished in their career? And then, are you sure that that could not have happened elsewhere? Let's unpack that. Let's talk about that. So those are kind of the questions or excuse me, the conversations we're having with hiring managers as it pertains to what they think they want in a candidate.
That's good. That's a really good point, and appreciate the question, Mark. It correlates with the job description, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have your must-haves, your wish list, the combination of the two, and now I'm starting to think, what are the skill sets that will propel the business for this position, right? Versus what you cannot do without, or what you can do without as the hiring manager. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you really need them to have 10 years, or can you develop someone who's five?
Mm-hmm.
Like you said,
Exactly.
do they need a certain programming code, or can you train them if they have two of them, right? And I think those conversations need to be had as recruiters, talent acquisition professionals who forward face the managers versus, it's tougher. It could be tougher for staffing agency recruiters, but for TAs that are on site, and having those constant conversations. Those I love that you're kind of changing that narrative and really forcing their mindset to shift when it comes to criteria of a candidate to fill these needs. What are some hurdles you're seeing now? This is more just around the market as we shift a little bit. What are you seeing some hurdles in the market when it comes to hiring during this pandemic, stage we're in now?
I think a couple of things when it comes to the hurdles that people are experiencing. I think some people are experiencing hyper growth, depending on where they're at, and some people are not. Some people are trying to figure out how to shift their current experience into a hyper growth market. So people are struggling to figure out how to tell their brand story or how to shift who they are into where they want to be. So that's a big piece of the market when it comes to those who are struggling. Now, the ones that are thriving are getting two or three consecutive offers at a time
Mm.
and get to really be choosy in the company they work for, which is awesome. It's a great time to be, just for example, in recruiting right now, recruiters are of the hottest demand. Never would have thought it would be such a hot market. You can get a job. I'm not saying none of these companies are desperate. However, let me say that just because the market is hot does not mean that they are going to adjust their requirements uh, to sacrifice quality.
Quality. Yep. Correct.
So I just want to say that. Don't think you can just slide in if you're not really qualified for the position. But the market has definitely, for certain industries, been hyper growth for sure. And as a result, it's hard. Like they said, it's what is well, I won't say that saying, but they are struggling to keep talent,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
struggling to keep them just as much as struggling to get them from each other, really.
Correct. So, a personal question: are you getting those? I get a bunch of random text messages for a bunch of different contract type roles. Just I'm like, are you guys even looking at the profiles of people you're targeting, or are you just doing a mass blast that show up in your database? I'm like, come
Sometimes I
on.
respond like, "Did you look at my profile? I'm just curious. What made you think I was an engineer? Just because I
Exactly.
hire engineers does not
Yeah.
mean I am one."
I'm like,
So
do
yes.
better. Do better. So one of the things I wanted to unpack, because time is slipping away,
Mhm,
is you said, telling the story, and storytelling is huge, right? But what I like, one piece that you said, is telling that story through your resume, right?
mhm.
Give folks an example of what that would look like, having your resume kind of speak for you and telling that story.
Um, a lot of people think your resume should reflect what you've done, all the things you've accomplished in your past, which is what is really tripping people. Your resume should reflect the position you want. So, what it really should be telling is how all of the things I've already done have prepared me for this next position. So, you really should be tailoring your resume for the next position, not the position you already had. So, for example, you're looking for, let's say you're a coordinator and you're looking for a recruiter position. We'll start just basic, but you've done a lot of the work. We all know recruiting coordinators are the heartbeat of recruiting, right?
Mhm.
They're making sure they're moving the vessel around from place to place and person to person, making sure it matches with this, with that. But they also sometimes, depending on the company, are also doing some of the recruiting. So talk about how what you've done uh, allows you to be qualified for that position. A lot of people, for example, will just put copy and paste a job description in their profile. And some of them will even advertise for the company in their profile. It's like they don't need you advertising. They already got a whole team that does that. You're just copying and paste. Oh, Roblox is this and is that, and they're doing this, and people know they don't even need you to advertise for them. You should be telling the story. Your resume should be I statements. Your LinkedIn profile should be I statements. What did I do? How did my contribution help the team? I used to think your resume and your LinkedIn profile needed to be humble. Talk
Mm,
about how you were a great collaborator and a great part of the team and we statements and well, we did this, even though it was just you, but you would, I don't know why you think you need to say we. And then you wonder why you don't get the job because they were looking for a leader. You described a contributor,
correct.
right? So make sure if you're looking to get in that leadership position, be honest with yourself. Have you already taken that on? Don't be afraid to apply for a manager position just because you don't have it. Think about, did you really manage a project, a product, a launch? Did you manage a segment in a project? Doesn't have to be the entire project. Focus on what you did do and talk about that in your resume and how that has prepared you to launch into this next position. Tell the right story because I'm only going to believe what you tell me until we talk, right? So
Mhm.
tell me the right story so that when I look at it, there's no doubt in my mind that you're qualified. I can't wait to get you on the phone.
I like that. I like that a lot because folks sometimes don't realize they can be a leader without having the leadership role, lead a group or projects and teams, and they fail to, like you said, tell that story of what they did because they're so used to just being a team. But if you really think about it, you can extract some of those leadership qualities and opportunities that you've done in the past and present to say, "Yep, I've led." Right, I actually led projects and teams. So, phenomenal point. So, time again is slipping away, so I want to take this last few moments for you, Willena, to share the best way for folks to connect with you, find you, and also get on your masterclass that's soon to come up. Share all that information with the folks.
Yes, yes. If you are interested in getting your resume better, creating your Super Bowl ad on your LinkedIn profile, and get some real interview tips that you can use and have for your next interview, go to yourfavoritecareercoach.com to sign up. We have general admission and VIP options. VIP will have extra time to ask live questions. General admission is just watching, but you are transforming your own resume. We're doing this live. I'm not just giving you fluff information where it's like, okay, yeah, just make it better. Just say I statements and leave it alone. You got it, right? No, I'm giving you real information. You're going to be crafting your resume live. By the end of the 90 minutes, you're going to have a new resume, a new
Wow.
LinkedIn profile. So you can sign up general admission or VIP, which has more time. I do everything VIP, but that's up to you. But you can sign up at yourfavoritecareercoach.com.
And when is the date and time for that?
Our next session is going to be on the 20th, this coming Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern, but it is something we'll do monthly as well. So if you catch this after the fact, you can sign up for the next class as well.
Okay. And I'll make sure, folks, to drop that link in the notes so you can just follow her, but also obviously connect with her on LinkedIn and click the notification bell because it's I feel like you're posting every day on videos and dropping content, right?
Yes, Monday through
Yeah.
Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, I am live with Ladder Talk.
A lot of talk. Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, Lena, thank you so much. I'm glad we connected. We had a chance to chat, and I love, again, some of that analogy. You need to add that to your profile, turning your LinkedIn into your Super Bowl commercial.
I'm
That's
changing it now.
you
I'm
need,
doing
you need to coin that. You need to coin that. You heard it
it.
here. So that is phenomenal. But I think, yeah, the tremendous amount of information that that you have with your wealth of experience in not only in the tech space but out of non-technical roles. Just your overall recruiting aptitude is great, and I'm a fan of your content. So appreciative of you joining me tonight. I'm gonna close this out with a video. Any last parting words for the folks?
No, thank you. I really appreciate your time, Orlando. I just want to leave everyone with something. Believe in you. You got this. We are all in this together. You're not alone. It all starts with believing you can achieve it and you'll do it.
Awesome. We'll leave it there, folks. We'll see you next week.